Hello, people, and welcome to the People Building Podcast, where today I will be sharing with you the story of Caroline Holke and how she went through a 10 million year breakup. Now, if you are wondering how it's possible for anyone to be in a relationship for 10 million years, let me tell you that humans, have been drinking alcohol for approximately 10 million years. And as Caroline quite rightly puts it in the show, alcohol is the only drug you take to prove you don't have a problem with it, which is crazy. So I have a very tricky relationship with alcohol because it's a problem in my family. And I don't want to dive into all of that right now. Listen to what Caroline has to say. You will hear snippets. There's a point where I'm talking about my dad's relationship with alcohol, and even then found it really difficult to say that he was an alcoholic because he was a social drinker. It's that time of year, so I'm recording this a few days before Christmas, even though I actually recorded the show with Caroline a good few months ago. And I know it's that time of year when people are drinking socially and maybe even binge drinking. And I don't know how much of that is I still don't really know how much of that is a problem, but there are some real pearls from Caroline throughout this episode, and I figured it was a relevant time to share this one with you. So you're going to hear a lot about how our beliefs around alcohol may need to shift if we want to have a healthier relationship with it. When we come back on the other side of the show, I will pop back in, give you my summary, but I will also tell you some of the more challenging relationships that I have had in my family because of alcohol and because of the way in which people in my family drink and what that does for me psychologically, because I feel like this one was just like really close to the wire for me, if I'm being completely honest. So I'm really interested to hear from other normal people, like how do normal people drink? Because I have no idea. And you're certainly going to hear what it was that motivated Caroline to make the decision to call it quits and to say enough is enough. So enjoy this conversation with the wonderful Caroline Holke. Have yourselves a very merry and safe Christmas. Enjoy yourselves over New Year and drink responsibly. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the People Building Podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Caroline Holke, who is going to tell us about a very interesting journey that she has been on in her life, which has involved a breakup. I'll say that much about it, and we'll reveal more about what that breakup was and how it came to be as the podcast goes on. But for now, everyone, here is Caroline. Welcome along, Caroline.
Thank you so much, Emma. It's so nice to be here.
It's wonderful to have you. Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and
Yeah.
how you've come to be here.
Okay, that sounds great. That sounds great. Well, how I you kind of led with the breakup, so I'll give you a little bit of the backstory on that. And that is, I will say that I grew up in a household where everybody drank. Well, not the kids. The kids didn't drink, but my parents were young. They had a lot of good friends. They partied a lot, and I watched that as a kid, and that those messages get seeded pretty early of, oh, if I want to be grown up and adult, then I should drink too. And they're having so much fun.
Yeah.
So it became, from a very early stage, that drinking equals fun. That equation was pretty cemented in my brain.
Yeah.
And so that's all fine and well. It wasn't, it's not one of those stories where there was anything terrible that happened in my childhood or anything. It was just, that was one of those things. It was one of those messages that I absorbed. And I went on to work in corporate America. I was in global corporate marketing for over 20 years. Um, so I bring that up because I think that a lot of people they would look at, my outsides, because we can only see other
Yeah,
people's
sure.
outsides. And they would say, oh, well, everything's fine over there.
Hmm.
But I knew internally that it felt like I was driving with the emergency brake on.
Right.
I knew that, and I knew that it had to do with my drinking.
Okay. Okay.
And I really became more attuned to that as my life went on. And until eventually I got to the point where I said, enough is enough.
Yeah.
And it's time to do something about this. It's time
And
to
so
talk about this breakup. Let's
in
talk about this
terms
relationship.
of so now it taken you to a place where obviously you're speaking about it. Are you coaching other people through this
Yes.
these breakups as well?
Yeah. And I will say very clearly that it's one of those conversations. I love the relationship analogy here, right? Um, it's one of those relationships where it's like, we have to talk. This
Hmm.
isn't working for me.
Yeah.
We need to figure something out.
Yeah.
Because I will say that I coach women on their relationship with alcohol. And sometimes that means a full breakup.
Hmm.
Sometimes it just means I need to create some boundaries around what I want.
Hmm.
And I need to figure out how to stand by those boundaries and how
Yeah.
to hold those boundaries really tight.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I'm going to take you way back.
Mhm.
You talked a little bit there about kind of growing up in a climate where alcohol was looked upon as something related to fun, and it was very good spirited. And actually, I had a similar experience as well growing up. My dad was a very big drinker, and people would ask me if I thought that he had alcoholism. And for a long time, I said no, because it was a social thing. And
Mhm.
he was very good at even it was like, I think he knew that there was a problem, but even he would say, it's only to be social.
Yeah.
This is the thing. It was part of his connecting with his friends was done through alcohol.
Mhm.
It was just very extreme. It was done
Mm.
in a very extreme
Mm.
way.
Okay.
So I, like you, was party to it as I was growing up. And so to me, it almost seemed like, well, that's probably what all families are doing, right?
Mhm. Oh,
You
yeah.
know, everyone
Yeah.
else is going to be having the same sort of experience.
Yep.
Um, and I, even things like witnessing hangovers and the ill effects that would come, it was almost as if that was part of the fun of it. Like they would laugh and joke about how terrible they felt the next day. So
Mhm. It's like a
even
badge
that,
of honor.
yeah, exactly. So
Mhm.
even that didn't seem unappealing in too many ways. So yeah, I think from my perspective, I was kind of seeing it as a Friday, Saturday night type of a thing, maybe Saturday during the day, Sunday during the day, but it was very much clustered over the weekend.
Mhm.
And then it wasn't really anything that took place during the working week. It seemed like the sensible hats went back on.
Mhm.
And so there was very much, yeah, very sort of clear boundaries around it in some ways. What
Mhm.
was it like in your household, in your family?
That's a great question. I think I don't remember it being um it wasn't completely raucous. It
Mhm.
wasn't, Monday mornings or anything. I would say there was kind of a constant drip. It's from memory. Yeah, I would say that. Maybe not in the beginning of the week, but certainly, midweek it would
Yeah,
pick up. Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, that's just what my memory of 40 years ago or 50 years
yeah,
ago was. So,
yeah.
yeah.
And
Mhm.
do you remember having your first drink?
I do very much. I
How old
do.
were you?
I was 13
Okay.
and I'm sorry.
Quite young. You got started early.
Yeah. 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 My parents were out of town, so we had a babysitter, and it was
Right.
like, yeah, that was very exciting because it was, we stayed up all night and kind of relished in the excitement of being so adult and grown up
Yeah.
and the whole thing. Yes.
And was that so was that particular incident one that you would look back on and see it as actually it was just a little bit of fun in that situation, or were there any ill effects from having done it at such an early age? Did you have a hangover?
I'm sure I had a hangover. I'm
Right.
sure I did. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how I wouldn't. I don't know that I had ill effects. I mean, I had ill effects from that moment. I'm wondering if your question is, did that kind of start the ball rolling?
Yeah.
And probably in some respect.
Okay.
I think the ground was really primed for that. I will say it wasn't unique for me. I mean, I know some of my friends were doing the same thing. And so, it wasn't, it was kind of the perfect storm of
Yes.
all of it coming together.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. And it's interesting as well when I sort of look back on a similar period of my life, how so when I was growing up, I had parents and grandparents who smoked, but it was always very clear that that was a very bad thing to do. And they didn't want any of us grandchildren growing up and smoking like they did. And actually we didn't. But it was a different it was just like the relationship with alcohol was very different to the one with cigarettes. It was like
Mhm.
they would still smoke and they would still drink, but they knew that the cigarettes were bad. But at no
Mhm.
point was there any kind of programming coming in to say, actually, you probably want to avoid alcohol as well. Was that
Right.
similar for you?
Yeah, for sure. They would say it on both.
Uh-huh.
I've always had the position that I think that, well, I know for me anyway, my belief has always been that I think that children watch what we do, not what we say.
100%.
And, so their messaging was clear to not drink and not smoke, but,
Yeah.
it's like, I
And what?
whatever.
Yeah. So
Right.
for you then, as you started to get older, were you kind of out partying with friends? Was that when it started to take off a little bit?
Yeah. And I would say, going to college, through high school and college, and even right out of undergrad, um, I was very much on par with all of my friends,
Mhm.
kind of drinking on the same level,
Yeah.
and got married and started to have a family. And I would still say at that point, it was still pretty much the same.
Mhm.
There are a couple occasions. There was one occasion where I was out with some girlfriends from work, and for whatever reason, I noticed that one of them was not drinking as quickly. She wasn't keeping pace with the rest of us.
Yeah.
And it was just that little flash of, I'm noticing it over here. And I did have, and nothing happened that night. The next day, I remember sitting down and thinking about it. Like,
Mhm.
I wonder why I noticed that.
Yeah.
Why did I pick up on that?
Mhm.
Is she pregnant? She's not pregnant, like, and maybe that's what it was when it started. But on further reflection, I realized that, this was something that was kind of playing around in the back of my mind.
Mhm.
I was starting to question it, even though I wasn't vocally questioning it. I was noticing things.
Sure.
And I like to think about this as it's like almost like a little nudge of, hey, look over here.
Yeah.
It's like my inner wisdom
Yeah.
is telling me something. I use the analogy of I've never had the inclination to be. I met somebody and they were talking about how their kid was going to be a meteorologist in the army. I was like, oh, that's so fascinating. You know, makes so much sense that you would need to have that specialty and, you know, all this kind of stuff. And I think it's fascinating how many different people have such different, unique, specific careers. And it's kind of cool. Now, the flip side of that is I have never had the inclination to be a meteorologist in the Army. Like I never had that nudge.
Yeah.
And yet I had this nudge to kind of look at my drinking. Like something's a little off here.
Yeah.
Let's trust that and see what's happening here.
Yeah.
And I will say that you know, my journey has taken a long time. I think that drinking there's a moral aspect to it. There's a belief in our society that you either drink, you're either a normal drinker or you're not.
Yeah.
And like there is nothing in between. And I don't believe anything in life is that black and white.
Sure.
Particularly when humans are involved. There's a lot of
I mean, we're a gray area, right?
yes. I don't think that, you know, we're ignoring how multidimensional all of us are.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that there's a lot that goes with that, but the net result is that people end up suffering in silence for a really long time because they think that they need to have this rock bottom moment.
Yeah.
Like they need to have a drinking problem and they ignore the problems that they're having with their drinking.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious for you, when you talk about that initial nudge, looking back, do you think that was coming from a place of wondering about your health? Was it coming from a place of perhaps feeling that quantity was an issue, regularity of the drinking? Like, where do you think that initial nudge was coming from?
Yeah, I think that my brother had gone through rehab a number of times. And so I had seen, and I think that this also, of course, became part of my story as well, is I saw that, you know, the solution is rehab and AA, period.
Yeah.
Therefore, you need to have a big enough problem where you have an intervention, where you have like, you know, you do these things. And so I think for me, that was my concern.
Yeah.
It was never a proactive, this is to be healthier. I know plenty of people are in that space.
Yep.
But for me, it was I think that there may be something wrong here. Or something's a little off.
Yeah.
And frankly, it came to the point where it was, I deserve better. I don't have to drive. I don't have to feel like I'm driving with the emergency brake on all the time.
Yeah.
Like how amazing could life be if I didn't start the day groggy half the time?
So you mentioned that you went into a sort of corporate work environment. How did that end up having impact on your relationship with alcohol? Was that the point when you started to feel that things, because you were saying that you were married and you had your family and that it was, you know, you still had a sort of fairly consistent relationship with alcohol, consistent with what other people around you would have. When did it start? Perhaps the nudges got a bit stronger.
Yeah, I had so in 2013, 2014, my husband had some health scares, which was very stressful, and my brother committed suicide.
Gosh.
So thank you. So that's where it really switched to a coping mechanism versus just social.
Yeah.
And that spilled over into a little bit into my job, just this handling stress and all that stuff. But that's where things changed for me. And I noticed that this isn't just social anymore. It's not that I'm drinking faster than other people. I'm using it to cope. It's my crutch.
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of, I guess, it allows you to tap out from your emotions.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. which is a big thing that I coach my clients on now is, I, nobody want, I haven't figured out a way to market. Let's feel our feelings because I don't think anybody really wants to buy that.
No.
No,
Let's lock
exactly.
them away.
Right. But unfortunately, that's really what
Yeah,
we're getting to,
yeah, 100.
and creating enough safety so that we can feel our feelings
Yeah,
and process them and, move on with life,
sure.
frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a very specific friend that came to mind with something you said there, who has been going through a big life changing set of circumstances, uh and that's happened more than once, as it does for many of us. Life tends to throw us more than one curveball. And she openly admits to using alcohol to, she would say, to get her to go to sleep at night.
Yeah.
And I take that as code for, when I try to go to sleep at night, my brain gets busy with all the emotional stuff, so I use the alcohol so that I can sedate
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah. And I think that this comes up a lot.
Mm,
That's a very common belief that people have, is that it helps me sleep.
yeah,
But if you look at data, even if they have a Fitbit or whatever, the
yeah,
data would show that they sleep a lot better without it.
100%. Yeah.
But when they have that belief,
Mm,
and that's a lot of what I do too,
yeah,
with I help my clients see, is like, as long as you have the belief that you're not going to have any fun without alcohol, or you're not going to be able to sleep and all
yeah,
these things, then I don't care how many tricks and hacks and whatever tools I give you. When you still have those beliefs, you're going to rubber band back to that behavior,
yeah,
because your body's just going to say, I have to have fun. Like
yeah,
life, that's the point of life. And I have to sleep. Hello.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
here's the solution here. So that's where, working on these underlying beliefs really helps.
Mm.
That's where we,
Did you have to go through a belief change process to
yes,
move to where you
yes,
are now? And what
yes,
was that like?
absolutely. I like to say that my last hangover was in August of 2016. I
Okay.
was on a work trip. I was in London, and the last night of our trip, everybody went out. There was lots and lots and lots of alcohol.
Mhm.
And I woke up the next morning just feeling awful. I
Mm.
mean, awful. Um, I had, you know, I one of the one of my colleagues had made a pass at me. I had, pushed him off and all that stuff. But that next day, I just went through the what ifs.
Mhm.
What if I'd had a little bit more? What if I hadn't, like, who knows, whatever.
Mm.
At that point, I was like, that's it.
Yeah.
And so I downloaded a book, This Naked Mind by Annie Grace, and I read that on the plane home. And I started at that point of really and truly,
Mm.
I was like, we're going to do something about this.
Yeah.
And that process is different for everybody, but typically most people will start with the rules, which is, I'm only going to have two, or I'm only going to drink on the weekends, or I'm going to have a glass of water in between each drink, da 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 da. All good and well. Um, most most of the time that doesn't work because it's based upon willpower,
Yes.
and because
Which you
we
don't have much of once you've had some alcohol.
right. Yeah, well, yeah, that's an even better point, because the alcohol has impacted the central nervous system, and so your prefrontal cortex is completely offline at that point. So yeah. Um and it hasn't addressed the underlying beliefs.
Mm.
So back to kind of my previous point of, if I believe that I will be boring if I don't have this third glass, if I don't have the shot,
Yeah.
then I mean, that's hard to combat. But if
Mm.
I pull back and look at, how freaking boring is it to spend a day in London laying in bed because you feel terrible? I
Yeah.
mean, that's pretty boring.
Yeah.
That is not how I wanted to do it.
No.
Um, so I started with the rules. I realized that I could only take that so far. And then I started working with a coach, and that's what really, really changed things for me, because then I started understanding how the brain works,
Mm.
how there's nothing wrong with me, that this
Yeah.
was completely normal. And I mean, just normalizing that in and of itself
Hmm.
was such a gift to me,
Yeah.
because there is such a weighty moral issue associated with drinking, particularly in the US. I mean, we've got such a crazy history of prohibition. Like, we've got this temperance movement, and we've got, I don't know. And it's just, yeah. I mean, I know that people all over the world drink for sure. I mean, I have got clients all over the world, so I know that. But I know that we all have our own special combination of baggage that we bring to the table.
Of course.
Yeah.
Do you think so? Your story really comes from a negative situation that kind of pushed you to taking
Mhm.
action in the right direction. I'm going to make a guess, but feel free to correct me if I'm not on the right track here. I'm going to say that most people who decide that they want to go through a breakup or a significant change in their relationship with alcohol land at that point because something bad has happened, or
Mhm.
it's been more of a negative motivator
Mhm.
rather than because I want to be really healthy.
Right. Right. I would agree with that. I would agree with that. I think that that can be a powerful moment to look
Mm.
in the mirror and say, we're going to do something.
Yeah.
I will also say there are many, many times that we go through that,
Mm.
that, today I'm going to change. Today it's going to be different. And, you know, kind of staying on that merry-go-round, that
Mm.
hamster, I'll call it a hamster wheel, because a merry-go-round's kind of fun.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but that day in of it's going to change, and then not quite getting there, and then beating yourself up because you fell down, and, you know, then feeling terrible because you're beating yourself up. And so then you want to drink, and it's like,
Yeah,
there we go again.
yeah. So is there, from what you've seen or even in your own experience, is there a kind of number of times that people might um, get back on the hamster wheel before they really reach the point of enough is enough? Like that's really it now.
Well, the key really, it isn't the number of times,
Mhm.
it's really addressing those underlying beliefs.
Yeah.
So, like, if you were learning how to ride a bike, you know that you can watch a YouTube video, and you can read a book, and you can listen to a podcast and all that kind of stuff, but you're really not going to learn how to ride the bike until you get on the bike. And you're going to, like, figure out how to get your balance, and you're going to fall down a couple times and all that stuff.
Yeah.
That's part of the process.
Yes.
But there's never any point, for the most part, there's really not a there's not a moment where you think, I'm never going to figure this out.
Hmm.
Like, if I just keep putting in the time, figuring out my balance, I will get there.
Yeah.
What happens with drinking, with our relationship with drinking, or with any sort of material change, is most of the time when we fall down, we say, forget it.
Yeah.
I'm never going to figure this out. I'm not going to do it.
Mm.
And then we give up on that opportunity to keep getting back on the bike and, like,
Yeah.
working out our balance and all that stuff.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Is it because something like drinking is so socially acceptable that it's almost like you're going against the grain if you choose to stop? You
Mhm.
become the weirdo, you know, if you're the
Yeah.
person that's not drinking, if
Mhm.
you're amongst people that normally do.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I say this from my experience, not because I'm calling you a weirdo. I'm
Yeah,
so
no, 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 no. No, I mean, I think that that's well articulated. I think that that comes up quite a bit. I think it's because of the identity shift that's required.
Yeah, yeah. So it's not just learning a skill, it's actually I'm changing myself as a person in some ways.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we do when we address these underlying beliefs that we've had since we were 2 years old, or
Yeah.
4-year-olds or whatever it is.
Mm.
That becomes an inherent part of your identity, a part of your belief system.
Yeah.
And a
Yeah.
belief is really just something that we thought over and over and over again, and we've accepted as our own.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Do you think there are almost cultural beliefs around alcohol? So not just our own individual beliefs, but like
Mhm,
culturally,
mhm.
we hold beliefs about alcohol, like this is acceptable, this
Absolutely.
is part of socializing. So
Absolutely.
that's going to make it even more challenging.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah, it is. But I would also say that there are a lot of cultural beliefs that, that we very openly do not agree with,
Sure.
you know?
Yeah.
Um, I will say that a lot of the people that I've met on this journey, my clients, peers, all that stuff, there's actually a little bit of rebellion in all of us.
Yeah.
And so I will say that tapping into that little piece of me
Yeah.
was really helpful. So I started on the journey. I actually moderated for about 3.5 years. And then at the beginning of COVID in March of 2020,
Yeah.
I decided that little rebellious streak kicked in.
Yeah.
And I saw everybody else just going face first into their cocktails. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I mean, that was one aspect of it. The other aspect was I had read that alcohol is actually like pouring gasoline on anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, March of 2020. Who's not anxious at that point,
Yeah.
right? Um, so that combination of those two things, I said, you know what, I'm gonna take 100 days off,
Mm-hmm.
see what happens. And frankly, I'm still doing that. I haven't quit drinking. I will have a sip every now and then. I was on
Yeah.
vacation last week. I ordered a glass. I drank a little bit of it.
Yeah.
Wasn't whatever. It was fine.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't really want it. So
Yeah.
I think that's the best position to be in
Mm.
because you never feel deprivation from something you don't want.
No, no,
Right?
absolutely. And how about in terms of other people's reactions to your decision? So, did you find any of those challenging in any ways, or were people generally quite accepting? I again, sort of thinking of my own circumstances. I would say I'm very similar to you. I don't not drink, but I don't drink.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
I have alcohol in my house, but 99% of the time I would choose not to have it.
Right.
And it's very rare for me to drink anything these days. Um, I'm also still conscious of when I socialize, I will deliberately construct circumstances that allow me to not have to make excuses for the fact that I don't want to drink. So I will offer to drive, for example,
Okay.
and pick
Okay.
everybody up because I know that in a way, it's probably peer pressure can still affect me
Okay.
and that I might still find myself keeping up with other people when I hadn't wanted to. Or
Mhm.
yeah, I had an incident really only a few weeks ago when I was at a friend's house and they just moved house. They were celebrating. There was a bottle of champagne. And I said, I only want a little bit because they know I don't drink very much, which I had. And then I turned around and they'd refilled my glass for me without asking permission. And then I felt obliged to drink it because they'd already done it. And just like all of these kind of social etiquettes were sort of getting in the way of me being as firm in my decision as I would have liked. So did you
Mhm.
have any of those sorts of challenges cross your path?
Mm. I didn't. When those come up, I see that as well. I will say a lot of people didn't even notice.
Yeah,
Like
that's handy.
sorry.
I said that's handy.
Yeah. I I mean, actually there is a term in psychology that's called the spotlight effect,
Hmm.
where we think that everybody is watching us,
Yeah,
but a picture the stage where everybody's got the spotlight on them and you can't see
yeah,
outside of that spotlight.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Nobody's really watching us as much as we're watching ourselves.
Yeah.
So I, so nobody really noticed. I also kind of let them own their feelings about that.
Yeah.
Um, so I took all of this whole journey as an opportunity to learn more about myself and um, kind of own what I wanted to own.
Yeah.
Like if they feel uncomfortable, I serve alcohol in my house. We've got a
Mhm.
huge bar, all that kind of stuff. Um, I have absolutely no problem with other people drinking. I just, it's just like black licorice.
Yeah.
I just
It's
don't
very
want it,
preference. Yeah.
and it's fine if you want it, have it. That's
Yeah.
fine. I mean, when I don't drink it, that means that's more for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that what you're describing though is very common. I
Mm.
had a client who didn't want other people to know that she was cutting back on her drinking.
Mhm.
And so because that she didn't want people to think that she had a problem.
Okay.
Okay, so think about how this is how it gets in our head.
Mm.
We say that alcohol is the only drug that we have to take in order to prove that we don't have a problem with it.
Mhm.
Picture that with heroin
Yeah. That's not
or
gonna last.
cocaine or whatever.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even question it,
No.
right? So I had a client who didn't want people to think that she had a problem with drinking. So she would tell them that she was hungover from
Right.
the night before, and that's why she wasn't drinking.
Wow.
Right.
I mean, 10 out of 10 for creativity. I would not have come up with that one.
But right. But aren't we just reinforcing what you're telling them that you don't want them
Yeah.
to know?
Yeah.
Right. And you're making it up. How about addressing the people pleasing behavior right there?
Yeah. 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 And I think that is the part that I found challenging is
Mm.
almost kind of regulating other people's emotions about my decisions for my body.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of where you are in your journey now, you're not still doing your 100 days,
Right.
but did you do the full 100 days and how was that?
Yeah, no, I did. I did. And I had done enough. I'd been moderating for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of the groundwork
Yeah.
there for me. There were some points where I felt a little bit of discomfort, but I look at discomfort as really as a signal that things are changing.
And going in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like I love that feeling after I've worked out, if I haven't been to the gym in a while and I work out and you get that like
Yeah.
buildup of lactic acid. It's like, oh, I'm doing something.
Yeah.
It's working.
Absolutely. That's
Mhm.
good.
Mhm.
And if you got now for your clients that you coach through this, is there a kind of step by step process that you go through with them? Is there a kind of point by point methodology that you've developed around this now?
Yeah, I work with clients one on one. And so everybody's a little bit different,
Yeah.
which I love being able to do that. I love being able to, if somebody shows up and they're having an issue with their husband or ex-husband or kid or whatever, we can address that
Yeah.
because I really love to let's talk about what's causing the stress that's driving you to drink.
Yeah.
Let's figure that out.
Yeah.
And we talk about that
Mm.
much more so than here are the mechanics of how many drinks you want to have and this, that, and the other thing. Those are all important for
Sure.
sure. But really taking ownership of how my client is showing up in the world and like what they can control and what they can't, which really all comes down to how they are interpreting the events around them.
Yeah.
But most of us don't know that. Most of us don't know that we can apply the same critical thinking skills that we know to use on art and literature and fashion or whatever, that we can apply those same skills upon our own thinking,
Mm.
reflect those back on ourselves. Because once we start doing that, then it's like, oh my gosh, do I
Yeah.
really want to keep this belief that that drinking equals fun. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Maybe that's not an absolute.
Yeah.
If I pull back, I've got pictures of the night at the bar, but I don't have pictures of throwing up the next day. Right? We don't include that in the whole montage of on Instagram.
It's so funny you say about that. So I was out with some friends just last week, and one of them I'd taken a holiday with, gosh, years ago, probably 15 years ago, if not more, 15, 20 years ago. And we had this really fateful night on holiday where we were overseas. So the shots of alcohol that are served are typically much bigger than we're used to. In the sort of very well measured bar drinks that you might have here. And so we'd not really accounted for that. And I think we'd skipped lunch, so we'd not really accounted for that. And then we went to a very nice restaurant and had a very nice dinner, but it wasn't a substantial dinner.
Yeah.
So we'd not really accounted for that. And we were still drinking these very, very strong drinks. Anyway, fast forward to later that night, and my friend became very sick. And one of the things that we'd had at dinner was like a spinach dish. So it's like a spinach and cream and garlic and all of this. And we were sharing a room with her sister as well. So three of us in the room. And the next morning when we got up and checked the bathroom, she had destroyed the bathroom with spinach.
Mhm.
And so it became a bit of a legacy story amongst our friendship group. Anyway, last week we went out for dinner. Now as slightly more grown up people, and this was when I did my designated driver role, so I wasn't drinking. But at the table, we ordered. So wine was ordered for the others that were there, and I also ordered a spinach dish. And my friend said to me, "Are you sure you want to order the spinach?" Given the sort of infamous story of
Uh-huh.
what happened that night. And I was thinking, I don't think it was the spinach that was the problem.
No.
But you're still ordering the wine.
Right. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
The
That
stories we
definitely
tell
happens.
ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I think about how, I mean, I don't, this laying, giving credit where it's not due. I think it's interesting. It's making me think of how we have been kind of trained to see carbs in such a bad light.
Yeah.
And like, it's like you shame yourself for having a piece of bread and yet polish off a bottle of wine without a problem. Like
Yeah.
it's two different things. It reminds me of when my kids were little and they'd say, "Oh, I've had enough, but I've got room for dessert." It's and one of them, I can't remember if it was my son or my daughter, he said, "Oh yeah, that's a different area of my stomach."
Wow,
Like
that's
for the
creative.
sweets. Okay. But I think that we think that too as adults.
100%.
Like, you know,
Yeah.
or like the regimen that we go through for our face and we work out, we do the face regimen and work out and wouldn't touch a piece of bread.
Yeah.
And then it's a different part of our brain for sure that like can justify the wine. And that's undoing a lot of the things that we just worked so hard to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So for most of your clients, are they seeking help because they are taking the edge off with alcohol because of stress? Or are they leaning more towards this is my social party downtime? And I'm kind of curious, again, sort of thinking back to my family circumstances. I know that my dad would have said, yeah, it's my social, it's my
Yep.
connection, it's with my friends. But
Yep.
actually, looking back now, I would really say, no, there was some issues there. There were
Mm,
definitely, so you were taking the edge off
mm,
of whatever
mhm,
those issues were, and
mhm.
kind of labeling it up as a social party fun time thing. It really was just a label. It
Yeah.
wasn't actually serving that purpose. What do
Right.
you do with the people that you work with?
Um, I think that, well, people come to me for a bunch of different reasons. I would probably say all of the above. But in the social situation in particular, what I would say, what I would kind of probe in is what's wrong with, just sticking with two. Like
Mm,
you've got a stated goal to not feel like terrible the next day. You've kind of figured out your edge
mm,
is two is fine or one is fine, whatever your number is, right? Everybody's a little bit different, and how much you've eaten and all that kind of stuff. So let's say she's decided it's two.
yeah.
Okay. So let's get curious about what's wrong with sticking with two. What's hard about that? A lot of times things that come up are I don't want to be boring. I don't want my friends to think I have a problem. I don't want this, that, and the other thing. And it all boils down to I don't want, like, I'm avoiding these negative emotions. It's just
Mm,
easier to give in.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so then that's the area that we probe into. Let's talk about that. Is that easier, really?
Mm,
Like, if you see the whole picture, let's pull back and see the whole picture. Maybe in that split second it's easier,
yeah.
but if we consider the ramifications the next day, because
Yeah.
you came to me for a reason,
Yeah.
right? And and then all of a sudden, okay, she can see it a little bit differently.
Mm,
And that helps. Just in that moment, that helps.
yeah. Yeah.
So that's one of the things that we talk about from a social perspective.
Yeah. Do you get many people who are drinking alone?
I have I think there are a handful of people, yeah.
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 Is the strategies that you might use with those people any different?
No, not necessarily. Actually, I'm thinking of a client who doesn't she figured out how to stop drinking out when she goes out socially.
Okay.
So she only drinks at home like one night a week,
Mm-hmm.
and it's totally stress related.
Right.
So, well, actually when we first met, one of the things that struck me was, how I think of a lot of the work that I do is like pattern recognition.
Mhm.
Like, oh, this is a little unusual. This is not what I normally see.
Yeah.
Like you've figured out how to do a lot of the outward facing stuff. You've already done that work. That means that you're capable of doing it.
Yeah.
So that's important to note,
Yeah.
right? Because we have to like gather these pieces of evidence that we
Absolutely.
have what it takes to
Yeah.
make the
To be able to
changes.
do it. Yeah.
And so really and truly it's about going so deep into what is the stress,
Mhm.
what is going on for you, and how do you want to frame it? Is
Mm.
that what you want to do? Like, if it truly is stress, that if there are some emotions there that need to be processed, let's process those emotions. Let's
Yeah.
work on creating safety for yourself so that you can get that out.
Yeah.
And because we've lived through 100% of the negative emotions that we felt.
Mm.
Our body knows how to handle them. We
Yeah.
just don't allow our bodies the
Yeah.
time to do that. And but so often it's the combination of going ahead and processing these feelings that have been suppressed for so long, and really starting to call bullshit on some of the thinking that we've had,
Yeah.
that we've carried forward for many, 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 many years.
Yeah.
And we believe it because it's in our own voice.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And I think the benefit of having an outsider looking in on that, having a coach for something like that is so valuable because that saying you can't see the wood for the trees, like
Mhm.
this is the wood and you are in amongst your own trees.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
It's
I mean,
very
I like to
difficult to
use
be an
the,
observer of yourself, isn't it? And to be subjective
yeah.
about yourself.
Hmm. And I think that that is really important to say, is that we're saying these things. We believe ourselves.
Yeah.
We do. Now, imagine the situation where, and I'll poke fun at, we're at a family dinner, and, the trope of, I'll just call him an uncle, whatever.
Yeah.
Somebody comes up and says something completely outrageous,
Yeah.
sexist, racist, whatever.
Yeah.
You're like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put up with that. But we say stuff like that to ourselves. We're
Yes.
not good enough. I'm an idiot. I'm never going to figure this out.
Yeah.
And if that guy said that, you'd be like,
Yeah. 100%. There's a story that I tell my clients, which really ties in with that self-talk. Because I think in the beginning, when you sort of first introduce people to that concept, it can be quite overwhelming. And then they're thinking about their thinking and they don't know whether they'll ever get a handle on it. And I had this one incident that I tell people about where I came home from work and I'd left the washing up that morning. I'd got up late, hadn't done the washing up, so there was a pile there waiting for me when I came home, and I was already tired and I was hungry. And so instantly, the voice is, oh, you've left that washing up there, now you've got to do it now when you're tired, now when you're hungry. And there it is, if you'd have done it this morning, rah, 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 like this. Anyway, so I did the washing up. I emptied out the washing up bowl, so the water was gone. And then I turned around and there was one bowl that I'd missed. And my inner voice went, so now we've got to fill up the whole sink again to wash up one more bowl. And I caught myself saying it to myself and was able to interrupt it and go, we're just washing up a bowl though, aren't we? It's really not that bad. And I made myself laugh out loud because I realized how dramatic I was being in my own head and how tense I was making myself in that moment over something that was so ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think we can all get to a stage where we're better moderators of what's going on in there, but it does take some practice, right?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I mean, it goes back to like being willing to be wrong.
Yes.
Like it's fascinating. I think we all do that. We argue for our own limitations. Like, why are we doing this? Why? Let's take a step back. And I think laughter is a great
100%.
tool.
Yeah.
I also like to think of, the primitive brain in some respects is like that pouty teenager that comes in and wants the $1,400 iPhone. It's like, no. So like, I use that one with my clients about the drinks. Like, really? I think so. I mean, I get it that you're asking, but nice try. That's a no.
That's so funny. I'm curious to ask your opinion on something. So this was, and I don't remember which one, which is frustrating me now, but I was watching or listening to a podcast, and there were a couple of coaches being interviewed around helping people with alcoholism. So real alcohol dependency issues that had gone through AA or something similar. But I guess the purpose of this coaching that they were then being offered was around reintroducing them to alcohol again, but in I'm doing air quotes, like a safe way. So in a way that you can go to a bar and maybe have a couple of pints and then go home. And so they would take their client to do that. And be with them and kind of coach them through it and talk to them how they were feeling about it at the time. And yeah, it was almost like a sort of bringing them back to alcohol, but in a socially safe, personally safe, health safe kind of a way. And when I heard about it, I really had like a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other shoulder. I had very mixed feelings about it because it was, I guess on one hand, I was thinking, well, these are people that really do have an alcohol dependency or have had an alcohol dependency.
Yeah.
We're kind of tempting fate a little bit by waving the thing that they've been most addicted to in front of them and sort of luring them back in. Is that dangerous? Versus, the other part of me going, no, but they should be able to do that. You should be able to have something that you enjoy without being fully addicted to it. And I still don't think I've quite drawn my final opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
What my
I
reaction
guess
is. I'm curious about yours.
I think I think that the fact that they have a clinical dependency
Mhm.
changes my answer a little bit.
Yeah.
Because in that case, I would say why.
Yeah.
It's not like we need alcohol to survive.
Hmm.
I know from personal experience, I have more fun without it.
Yeah.
I can be more present, so that would be my question, be why would that be important?
Mm.
No, another person who is not clinically dependent, who is just finding out, like very similar to where I was,
Mm.
that I have a different answer for that.
Hmm.
In that case, I feel like the label of alcoholism is, I guess I don't go into the camp of believing that. I don't believe in labels. I don't believe that they're helpful like that. Now, some people do.
Yeah.
Some people can just say, no, this is a hard line. I'm not going over there.
Hmm.
And I'm going to include alcohol and I'm going to include sugar and I'm going to include
Sure.
black licorice or whatever, whatever it is. But I'm going to take that black licorice off the list because I prefer to work in the space of recognizing, how the brain works.
Mm.
So if I've got a neural pathway that says that when I get home at 5 o'clock, I have a glass of wine,
Hmm.
I actually really encourage my clients to keep that ritual,
Hmm.
but just change out what's in the glass.
Yeah. Okay.
Continue to mark that as the end of your workday. And this is the start of your evening at home.
Yes.
Have a beautiful glass,
Yeah.
make a beautiful mocktail, have some club soda and
Yeah.
lime or whatever,
Yeah.
but keep the ritual
Yes. Yeah. I
because
like.
that's important.
Yeah.
But is what's important is what's in your glass really that important?
Yeah.
I
It's
I mean,
interesting you say that. It makes me think about so I work with a few people who give up smoking. And one of the things that they might say is that they enjoy having the break in their day, the social aspect that comes with, the cluster of the other smokers that are outside who they get chatting with. Um, and they'll be able to list a good few benefits, which I can't dispute are definitely benefits.
mhm,
Having a break in your day is definitely a good thing.
yeah,
Connecting with other people is absolutely a good thing. So what I work to do then is to encourage them to still do those things,
yeah, totally.
but without a
Totally.
cigarette.
Yeah, I 1,000%. I mean, it's understanding what the need is. Address the need in a different way
Hmm.
because, a lot of people will say that very similar to what you're describing there is like that's alcohol is the connection point.
Yeah.
Like, are you truly connected
Mm.
when you're sitting around with a bunch of friends and you're kind of not even with it?
Yeah.
You don't even remember the whole conversation the next day, or it's a
Yeah.
little fuzzy.
Yeah.
Is that connection? Really? Because true connection is making sure that whoever you're with is feeling seen, heard, and understood.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you've kind of taken part of your prefrontal cortex offline
Yeah.
from the substance, how is that even possible?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's a very fair point.
Yeah.
How is what you do different to something like AA?
So I help my clients create the relationship that they want with alcohol.
Hmm.
AA is absolutely no way, no how,
Yeah.
period. It's also very much of a cookie cutter.
Hmm.
So my clients are not at the point where it is a clinical dependency.
Hmm.
Yes, there's an emotional dependency to some degree, but we work on that.
Mm.
And if she wants to go out and have a couple glasses of wine at night, there's no reason why that's not possible.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fair enough. Do you do work with them as well around if they're gonna do it, doing it in the safest possible way or the healthiest possible way? Is that part of what
Yep.
you might
Yeah.
discuss?
Yeah. And it's understanding in the beginning. it's really what I see is there are kind of three phases. The first phase is when a client comes to me, she's pretty much, she's at her last straw.
Hmm.
She's tried a bunch of other things and they haven't worked. It's like, okay, fine, I'll do this.
Yeah.
I've seen enough of Caroline's posts. I'm going to try it. um, the, and so she's really beaten herself up quite a bit. So
Hmm.
that first stage is really about reestablishing self-trust.
Hmm.
That's so critical. And we do that through couple different tools about just me talking to her about my experience, not only for myself, but for all the people that I work with,
Yeah.
and just helping her feel normal.
Mm.
That is so helpful. But then I give her some tools that she starts working with,
Hmm.
and, deciding ahead of time what she's going to drink.
Yeah.
It's different than the rules
Hmm.
because she's done it 24 hours in advance.
Yeah.
And she's definitely using the prefrontal cortex. She's also recommitting to it before she goes out.
Mm.
And she's doing it not because of the number of drinks. She's
Yeah.
doing it because she wants to be a woman that keeps her word to herself.
Yeah.
That higher order benefit,
Mm.
really, that is very enticing
Yeah.
when you place that on level with that third glass of wine.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And I guess it's important too that not having that third glass of wine is not seen as a punishment.
Yeah. Yeah.
That actually the what you're doing that for, or your motivation, or what you get on the other side of that, is a
Yeah.
reward in itself.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And to that point, actually, we do get dopamine from doing something that we say that we're going to do,
Yeah.
like completing a job.
Yeah.
So there's dopamine. Yes, there's dopamine from that wine, but there's also that dopamine that from feeling proud of ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
And the
that's,
opposite's true if you don't do what you said you were going to do.
mhm,
You're going to have a dopamine shortfall then, because you realize that, well, actually I can't keep my word to myself.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. And I think that is a really sensitive moment too, where working through all the judgment that comes up
Mm.
and learning how to set that aside, in honor of the 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 bigger picture.
Mm.
That it's already happened.
Yeah.
It's not going to help to beat myself up over it more.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
let's figure out what happened so that we can learn from it moving
Yeah.
forward. It's
Yeah.
like, let's pretend like we're in sixth grade and this is the science experiment kind of a thing. Like, there's no judgment.
Yeah.
It happened. And what can we learn? How can we be
Yeah.
smarter?
Yeah. 100%. So seeing those, well, is a blip, seeing a blip as a blip, and not
Hmm.
making it any more dramatic than it needs to
Hmm.
be.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, nobody's journey is linear,
No.
period. So, and we know that intellectually, but we all kind of say, but I'm going to be different
Yeah.
and I'm going to beat the hell out of myself when I'm not. Like, what? Let's just skip that part.
Yeah. 100%.
Hmm.
How long does it normally take? I'm guessing it's going to be different for different people. Everyone's got
Yeah.
their individual
Yeah.
journey, but
Your
is there
your
a
mileage may vary.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think it will be different for everybody, but I do have a 12-week program.
Okay.
And that is, that seems to be the right amount of time. I'm looking at data right now and trying to figure out if maybe I extend that a little bit more,
Yeah.
because quite a few people they do re-up.
Yeah.
Um, and so, maybe out of the gate, 6 months is, I don't know, I'm playing with that idea, but right now it's
Yeah.
12 weeks.
Yeah. Okay. Is there, from what you've seen, is it sustainable? When someone's been through a program like that, are they set for life, or might they need a top up later on
Hmm.
down the
Hmm.
line?
Hmm. Well, the tools really, if they've committed to using the tools and really learning them, then those are sustainable.
Sure.
Absolutely. No, I do have a number of people that will just have one-offs every now and then, like, oh, I'm running into this. I just need an outside I need somebody that's outside of my brain to help me see where I'm caught up with something.
Sure.
Yeah.
Bit of
But a lot of times those things have come up on not necessarily drinking related. There are other things that have come up.
like
So
the life happens kind of stuff.
right,
Yeah.
right, right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Again, going back to a smoking client that I worked with, I remember there was this one lady who, so she came, we did a session together, or a couple of sessions. She stopped smoking. And about 6 weeks later, she sent me a message and said, I'm really disappointed. I've started smoking again. I really need to come back and see you. And we got talking, and I said, what happened in that time, because you did so well for so long, so I'm really interested to know, was there anything in your life? And she said, no, not really. I mean, I was under a lot of pressure at work, and then my son got expelled from school, and she kind of listed off all of this stuff, and I was like, yeah, I probably would have had a cigarette as well, and I don't smoke.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Did she see it when she said it out
yeah,
loud?
when I
Yeah.
kind of relayed it back to her, she was like, yeah, fair point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. But
Again,
I mean, to your point, like we don't unlearn the things that we've learned.
of course.
I mean, sometimes we forget them.
Yeah.
We need to be reminded.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. If I do that,
Yeah.
yeah, that seems to work.
Or reaction them again. Sometimes people just need to go back to that new good habit that they'd been carving out for themselves, and just get
Mm-hmm.
themselves back into that groove again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. So what are the sorts of things, I'm wondering if there are sort of other positive spin-offs that people experience in their lives once they've made the decision to change their relationship with alcohol.
Yeah, it is pretty big. I think of the opportunity cost that alcohol really takes on us. It becomes quite a drain
Yeah.
on us. And so when we right size that, then what I see very typically is an increase in energy,
Mm-hmm.
um, really feeling more empowered about, being able to achieve this, being able to conquer this
Yeah.
that's amazing. And then channeling that, because these tools really work for anything else, any other goal. So that feeling of empowerment, I've seen changes in relationships, because again, like I don't have to put up with these things that I don't need to put up with.
Yeah.
And what happens very often is when people get their relationship with alcohol where they want it, when they feel like they're 100% in control versus at the effect of it, then they first what happens is, and this is kind of a tenuous moment, where they look around and they're like, well, no shit, I was drinking. Like, now I know why. Because I don't like this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
And so that is really actually kind of an exciting moment, because let's go ahead and fix it.
Yeah.
Let's not put more, duct tape on it or spackle or whatever, let's go ahead and fix it and figure it out and make it so that I love the idea of like creating this life that you don't want to numb out of.
Mm-hmm.
How many people come to me and they're like, I can't deal with it. I can't wait until this point of the day where I just get to check out.
Mm.
Like, let's look at the other side of that. What if your life was so amazing that you don't want to?
Yeah.
You don't want to. You don't want to miss any of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're going to see, I don't know, Oprah or like your favorite person.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't want to miss any of it.
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm totally present for it. Not all of it's going to be amazing, but it's real.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself is amazing.
Yeah, I bet. Do you think it changes people, maybe even on a personality level? And the reason I ask about that was something that you said that made me think about the NLP training that I do, where we teach people to become coaches, but it's also a self-development course in itself. And so they'll clear out lots of their old skeletons from the closet, and uh, typically come out the other side of it feeling much more confident, much more empowered. And all of that sounds lovely and amazing. And I have a habit, unfortunately, of people then reporting back to me a few months later that they're splitting up with their significant other. And it's
Mm,
normally because they've gone back, and it's like they've taken off the grey tinted spectacles and see things, or rose tinted spectacles, more likely to see things as they really are. And
yeah.
they realize, actually, no, this is not
Yeah.
the one.
Yeah.
And so it
Yeah.
brings the relationship to an end, because they've maybe not changed as a person, but they've evolved in some way.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
they can see where their values are not aligned, and they're not scared of saying so, or they're
Mm,
not scared of taking the action to step away once they've realized that, in the same way that they might have been before.
okay.
And I'm wondering if there's a sort of similar experience that some of your coaching clients might go through, where because they now feel so empowered, and because they are seeing things for how they really are,
Yeah.
that actually, there's that ramification of, and I don't like it, so now I want to
Mm,
switch up my life in some other ways.
hmm. Hmm. I haven't run into that so much. Because what I've seen is that they feel empowered for sure. But feel empowered to really own what's theirs to own.
Hmm.
And it does take a certain amount of confidence and um, I don't know. I'm struggling for the word here, but we'll just go with confidence. It does take a certain amount of confidence to actually love somebody unconditionally.
Mm.
Maybe it's vulnerability.
Yeah, maybe.
Um, and kind of let them be who they are.
Hmm.
Because I think that that's an important part in relationships. What I talk about so much is like when we clean up what's on our side of the street, then I mean, that really takes care of like 70% of it.
Sure.
And then we can figure out, of that last 30%, those are what is in there that I'm really willing to die on my sword about.
Hmm.
But when you go into a relationship and it's like everything has to change,
Yeah.
that's not realistic. That's not true either.
Yeah.
Because so much of it is how I'm thinking about things, how I'm showing up, and I'm expecting you to do all these things.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you make me feel good. You clean up all this stuff. You do this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah.
Right. Nobody wants to be in that relationship. So I think it's a little bit of a dance. I think that but that empowerment part is critically important
Mm.
for sure. I have not seen it so much go to the ending of relationships. And
Mhm.
it's interesting too, as you were saying that, you said that was a ramification of,
Yeah.
um, and you know, not all relationships last.
No.
Maybe that's an appropriate closure of,
Yeah.
um, but everybody's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you hear anything from your clients about how their significant others might be reacting to the changes that they're making and the decisions that they're making?
Yeah. For the most part, very supportive.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, I do joke with friends that I remember I went over to see a girlfriend's new condo, and I brought a bottle of wine, and um and she said, "Oh, you're not drinking?" And I said, "Oh no, it's all for you. It's like it's more for you." And like and how we treat it as I didn't feel deprived at
Yeah.
all. And she was like, "Oh, this is cool." Like she wasn't going anywhere. It's her apartment. She can
Yeah.
drink the bottle of wine, whatever. Um but I think it depends on how we're showing up about it too.